Hey, well, welcome once again to Rediscovering Your Passion and Purpose with Patty. I am Patty Stuhlin. I am the host of this episode and every episode of this podcast series, and I am the Chief Pathfinder of Pathways with Patty. And once again, my guest is someone who is filled with passion and purpose for what they are doing, not only to change their part of the world, but to also help other people make the changes in their own personal lives and their part of the world. This week, my guest is Clint Callahan. He is a therapist who has been working since the year 2000. He's a business life coach and created the Small Changes, Big Impact 1% per day transformational system. And now he can add that he's an author. He published his first book, Beat Burnout in 15 Minutes a Day, How to Prioritize Yourself Without Losing What and People, Practical Psychological Tools to Beat Burnout and Stress in 15 Minutes a Day. His professional background is diversified and robust. It spans business management, program design, team collaboration, along with therapy, crisis management, case management, and EMDR trauma processing, which I'm sure he's going to explain what all those letters mean as well. Clint, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to talking about whatever we're going to talk about.
Well, your background, and I know when we talked a couple weeks ago, your story is so profound and can reach and relate to so many of our audience out there today that I'm just excited to get into your story. So if you wouldn't mind, please share with us your story about where you started and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Sure. So when I was born, I weighed 1 pound, 15 ounces. This was 47 years ago. So that is basically, I'm lucky to be here. That's really what it came down to. It's what I was told by my parents, that I was a miracle, that the fact that I can walk and talk and see and, think and just be normal is, a very amazing thing. And, on the one hand, yeah, that's a great thing. And on the other hand, it kind of is a burden to put on a kid, right? Because I didn't ask to be born the way I did. It just happened to work itself out, because for so many other, kids my age, it either didn't at all.
Right.
And so from that led to, I went to elementary school and middle school, high school, and I was bullied a lot as a kid. And that really gave me a lot of anxiety. It gave me people pleasing. It gave me depression. It gave me all these different things that were going on because of the bullying. That it created somatic symptoms with regards to how I dealt with it. Instead of talking about it, I held it in, and it made me physically ill. And so I missed a lot of school when I was growing up, just because I was physically ill. My body reacted in that way. And then eventually it began to change from me holding it in to me letting it out. So I became really angry. And that's when my parents really noticed that, okay, you're a really angry kid. So that's when I went into therapy for the first time when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And that for me was the turning point. It gave me words I didn't have before. It gave me.
So that was a welcoming thing that your parents were having you do. It wasn't like you were fighting it tooth and nail. No, I don't want to go. You welcomed this.
Well, in the beginning, of course, I fought it tooth and nail, because I don't want to be different or weird or strange or have to go talk to this stranger about what's going on.
Right.
But eventually it gave me words. It gave me language. It gave me understanding. It let me recognize, oh, there's more than 3 feelings. I can be more than just happy, sad, or angry. Wow. Oh, okay. That's amazing.
Right.
And so it allowed me to have this increased vocabulary around feelings and thoughts and how to express myself in a way that was healthy. And that began my love affair with psychology and with therapy and with all these different things. And so initially, of course, I didn't want to be in a girl profession, because most therapists back then were female. And so I wanted to do something manly with being a therapist or being a social worker. So I wanted to join the FBI and be a behavioral profiler and chase after serial killers. But after working as in a maximum security prison for a year while getting my master's degree, it cured me of that really, really quickly.
I can only
Because
imagine.
spending every day in the minds of people that are going through this was made the world darker and not a fun place to be.
Right,
So
right.
I chose to, I basically chose, no, I want to do therapy. I want to help people. I don't want to try to help people after they're gone. I want to try to help people while they're here. And so
Hmm.
from there, that began my process of learning how to be a therapist and be a clinical social worker and do case management and all these different hats that I've worn of building transitional housing programs and all the different stuff that I've done throughout the course of my career.
So real quick though, so here you are, what did you say, you were 11 or 12 when
Mm-hmm.
you, I mean, I don't want to assume anything, but you obviously must have had somewhat of a good relationship, working relationship with that therapist,
Mm-hmm.
because I could see where if that experience wasn't very good, that would not have set you on the path that you're on now. So,
Yes.
so you found that to be a very good and positive experience with that therapist.
And I did, because the therapist was very good at breaking it down for me in a way that I understood. They didn't talk over me. They didn't talk down to me. They spoke to me. They tried
Hmm.
to get my story out of me, which is a lot of what I try and do with other people, is I really try to get them to tell me where they are. Because when I was trained as a therapist, for most therapists, they're trained as, well, you're the expert.
Right.
But what I found throughout the course of my career is, no, I'm not. I have a
Hmm.
good body of knowledge about certain things, but the person that's the expert is the person sitting across from me, because you're the
Mm,
expert in your life. So
yes.
if you don't tell me and you don't know what's going on in your life, then there's no way I can provide you any kind of guidance, because if you don't know where you are, then how am
Mm,
I supposed to even know where you are? And so that's one of the first things that I tend to do with people, is I help them figure out, where are you? What do you want to do? Who do you want to be? How do you want to how do you want to show up in your own life? Because that's one of the big thing that a lot of us are getting stuck in, is most of us don't know how to show up in our own life anymore, because there's so much distraction. There's so much information overload. There's so much digital stuff that can suck us out of our life, that
mhm.
we don't know how to be present anymore. And that's one of the things that I've really noticed is really causing a lot of suffering for people that are now some people are forced to work from home, where they miss being in an office, which a lot of them said, I never thought I would ever say ever in a million years that I miss commuting to go into the office, to be around people, to be interrupted. Where, yeah, even though I may not have been as efficient, I was more healthy, and I didn't want to quit every day because I
Right.
felt so isolated and alone.
That's exactly my niece, who happened to be a podcast guest on my first season. She said the same thing, because same thing when COVID hit, everybody had to work remotely, and she
Mm-hmm.
said, "Oh yeah, at first it was like, yeah, cool, I can stay in my pajamas but still get paid, blah 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 blah."
Yeah.
And after a while, I mean, she really started noticing that in-person social one-on-one, she
Mm-hmm.
was craving it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was okay to be on Zoom with somebody, but it was not the same as being in a physical presence with another person. And just the effect that I know that it had on her, I know that that was a common occurrence across the globe, actually.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, so so after my mom died, and I got back in, and I got out of therapy for a while, and then I got back in, and then I was in real estate for a while, and then I got back into therapy. I was doing case management for a large insurance company in California, and I was doing therapy and case management, but it was all remote, because the closest office for me was in Southern California, was in
Mm,
the Woodland Hills area. So I
okay.
was living in San Jose. So I had to work remote. And so they would fly me down there and have me come down like every quarter, just to meet and talk to my other coworkers and stuff, to give me that kind of connection. Because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise I was basically an island unto myself. And that was also one of the times when I was the most burned out, the most disconnected, was
Mm-hmm.
because of that. Because I literally didn't, I left the house. Basically, my routine ended up being, I got up, got the kids ready, commuted an hour and a half to work from home to take them to daycare and school, come back home, work, cook dinner, go to bed, rinse and repeat. That was
Right.
right. I didn't leave the house. My wife eventually had to kick me out of the house one night a week because I didn't leave. I
Right.
just stayed there. And I was the most profoundly unhappy and unhealthy than I've ever been because of that process. And that's the thing that I've noticed a lot of people that I work with is the more that I work with people that are working from home remotely, majority of the time, like 95% of the time, the more they're craving that in-person interaction, the more they're craving and feeling like they have no boundaries anymore with work. And
Hmm.
that's the thing that is the most difficult is the digital age, although it's amazing that what we're in, the amount of information we have access to, it also puts our brain in a continuous 24/7 on-call mode. And when
Hmm.
I first started out my career, I worked in on-call crisis intervention. And the weeks when I was on call, I slept poorly. I couldn't relax. I couldn't even be calm because
Hmm.
I was waiting for the other shoe to drop every second of every day. And that's kind of what we've been programmed into with cell phones and notifications
Right.
and all these different things, that it is creating this new phenomena called micro burnout that people are getting into.
Well, that's an interesting point too, because with talking about my niece, she said the
Mm-hmm.
same thing, that that was the tough thing is before, when she was going to an office, when the day was done at the office,
Yeah.
the business part was done and then personal time began. But now
Mm-hmm.
business and personal was all in the same space. So
Yeah.
she would work longer hours, and
Mm-hmm.
there was no delineation between business and pleasure anymore. And I
Yeah.
know one of the best pieces of advice that I ever received was one of my principals, because I was living an hour away from where I taught. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was really getting burnt out, and he could see it. And he called me in one
Yeah.
day, and that's never good when the principal calls you into the
No.
office.
Whenever
And
your
he
boss calls you in,
exactly. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And he just said, he closes the door, and it's like, what's going on with you? And I go, what? And he goes, you just seem so stressed out. And so I just started bawling. And
mm-hmm.
basically, I was, even though I was leaving the physical building and space, I was still
Mm-hmm.
taking it home with me.
Yeah.
And what he told me, he said, you know what, because where I was teaching, it was what's called up the hill. I lived
Mm-hmm.
down the hill. He said,
Mm-hmm.
when you get to the top of the pass, when you're leaving
Mm-hmm.
school and you're at the top of the pass, once you go down the pass, school stays up the pass
Yeah.
and personal time begins down the pass. And you know what? It was such a simple piece of advice,
Yeah.
but it made a world of difference for me psychologically,
Mm-hmm.
emotionally, everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I had that visual reminder. Okay, top of the
Yeah.
pass, boom, that's it.
And that's a process that I go through as a therapist every day because my job is to be a professional secret keeper and advice giver. So I have to carry everybody's stuff. But I also realized, no, I don't. So it reminded me back of in crisis, and when I took my crisis intervention class, what my crisis intervention teacher said is, there's two ways that you can function long term as a therapist. Is you have to learn to be the lightning rod, because if you find out that because if you are the one holding the lightning rod and you smell chicken cooking, that's you, because that's what happens to us is we hold on to these things that we think that if we let them go, somehow they're going to magically disappear, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't magically disappear. We still hold on because we want to do good. We want to get out of boys and out of girls, and we want to
Mm-hmm.
be praised and loved for what we
We need
do and
that
how we
validation.
need the validation. Yes, exactly. And so I've had to learn how to basically have an invisible box next to my door where I take off my where basically it's like Mr. Rogers, right? Where he comes in and he puts on the sweater and puts on the shoes and does all the things. It's like you have to do that in your own brain
Right.
when you're done with work at the end of the day, because don't have your email synced to your phone for work. Don't do it. That was
Mm-hmm.
the biggest mistake I did because I couldn't escape it. Then
Right.
anytime an email notification popped up, well, I'll just look at it for just a minute or two. And now my brain is back into work mode.
Right.
And
And
so
you just
that's
go
the
down that rabbit hole, and
yeah,
then you're
because you
gone.
can't help it. Because you
Right.
can't help it. Because your brain is like, well, it's just a second. It's no big deal. And then it's 3 hours later, and you're like, oh, oops, I probably shouldn't have done that. But
Right.
that's what we do because we keep forgetting that work isn't going to go anywhere. If there's
Right.
one thing I've learned in my life is that when I come back the next day, work is going to be here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to magically disappear. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a client will disappear here and there, but that's part of life. But
Right.
ultimately, it comes down to all you can do is say, hey, it's going to be okay. I'm entitled to a personal life. I'm entitled to a professional life. But that boundary between has to be a 25-foot iron wall that
Mm-hmm.
only you have the key to get through, and you can lock it down at any time. Because if you don't do that, the boundary becomes so blurry between work and personal, especially working from home, especially having the ability to interact with work even when you're not at work, thanks to technology, that we
Mm-hmm.
forget that we are entitled to personal time, and we don't have that personal time. It begins to create, like I was talking about before, this micro burnout phenomenon that's happening. Because when people think about burnout, they often say, well, burnout is only about work. Burnout is only because I'm working too hard, I'm doing too much, I'm not taking time for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. You can get burned out in your personal life too. You can
Right.
get burned out in your professional life. You can get burned out being a parent. You can get burned out, commuting. You can get burned out having to cook dinner every night and decide what the menu is going to be. It becomes this
Mm-hmm.
decision fatigue that happens. And so it's recognizing these micro things that then coalesce together and become the big thing of burnout, when all of a sudden it does start to affect your family. It does start to affect your relationship. It does start to affect your work. And usually the last place that it affects is your work, because that's your last bastion of, if I let this go, I don't have a job, which means now my very survival is at stake. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why work is the last place that it shows up. And you've actually been in micro burnout and in stages 1, 2, 3, and up to 4, which is the work piece of burnout, for like probably months, potentially a year prior to that.
Wow. Do you feel that burnout is definitely on the rise now more than ever before, or is it pretty much stayed the same over the past couple decades?
Oh no, burnout has increased exponentially in the last, ever since COVID, just because of the very fact of that that the boundaries are blurrier between work and between home, that the sense of isolation and the sense of disconnection has increased dramatically just because of the way we communicate with each other. Because
Mm-hmm.
before, if you wanted to talk to somebody, you had to do it in person.
Right.
Then the telephone was invented, and but you'd have to hear their voice. Now you don't even have to hear their voice. Now you can just send someone a text message, and
Right.
you can do Zoom calls, FaceTime, all that different kind of stuff too. But usually it's faster just to shoot a text and be
Right.
done with it, right? And
Right.
that's the part that we're missing, is that we're losing the ability to have social interaction in a meaningful way, because even this, I'm getting about probably 30 to 40% of your body language in this.
Right.
When before I'd get 100% because you'd be sitting right in front of me and I would see that. But
Mm-hmm.
that's the difference, is human beings, we were literally raised for 250,000 years, up until about what is that? FaceTime, phones, about 120 odd years ago, when that
Mm-hmm.
stuff started happening, where
Mm-hmm.
it is face to face. It is person to person, eyeball to eyeball, that kind of stuff. And we don't recognize, because our biology changes so slow, that we are still stuck in face to face caveman times when it comes to social interaction. But yet, because of the digital interactions, they know how to ping that part of the brain that makes you feel like you just got an authentic connection, but yet, no, you didn't.
Well, because that's so true. Because I guess being an educator all those years and always being around people,
Mhm.
I did not realize until COVID hit how I crave that personal space with other people until COVID
Yeah,
hit. And I don't remember how it might have only been a couple weeks into the whole isolation thing, when at least when they shut down the state of California.
yeah.
And one of my other friends that lives not too far from me, she called me up and she said, do you want to meet me and go for a walk? We'll stay 6 feet apart, but I just need to be in the space of another
Hmm.
person. I said, I
Hmm.
totally agree.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was an action actual craving I had
Mhm.
to be in a physical space with another person. And that was the first time that that it really hit me how important, um,
Mhm.
not yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be touch, but just being in a physical
Yeah.
space with another human being, how important that is.
Well, and because it's literally encoded in our genetics, it's a part of us, and it's that thing that as we as we continue to experiment with the way we want to do stuff with regards to how we work and the way the digital world is allowing us to have all this flexibility, but also it's still in the hands of people that are having to make decisions, right? Because it's like
Mm-hmm.
the thing with COVID is they found out is, oh, people can work from home. So now we're going to save hundreds of millions of dollars in utility costs, internet costs, owning buildings, renting space, all these things. And so companies are like, yeah, let's switch to that. We'll pay for your internet. We'll do all these things and you can work from home. And it's great. For them, what they're finding now is the amount of turnover that's happening in their spaces has doubled or tripled.
Mm-hmm.
And for most people, even in a mid-level job where you're making about $65,000 a year, the cost for them to replace you when you leave is usually about about usually half to the exact same amount of your cost that it costs the company when you leave. So it's
Wow.
very expensive lesson that they're learning, but they still think it's worth it because they have all this extra money floating around because they're not paying for buildings and all this stuff, but the
Right.
turnover rate is accelerating because people are not getting the connection that they got before. And so what I'm most fascinated to see is how is the generation of kids that were in COVID for the first 2 years of schooling, kindergarten and first grade, how is that going to affect them long term with regards to social interaction? Because that's
Right.
when the building blocks are created. And so having as an educator, so
Mm-hmm.
seeing how that's going to affect things is going to be really fascinating in the future. And actually it's kind of quite scary as well.
Well, because I know some of my friends, they are, fifth and sixth grade teachers,
Hmm.
and that is exactly what they're talking about, that they had hoped by this point, by the time they got in fifth and sixth grade, that those children had
Hmm.
caught up, so to
Yeah.
speak, and they said,
Hmm.
no, they have
Yeah.
not. And a lot of it is from an emotional standpoint more than it
Hmm.
is from a brain standpoint, an
Yeah.
educational standpoint.
Hmm.
And so going right along with what you're saying, I think there are going to be some very long-term effects with
Hmm.
them, especially.
Yeah. And the sad thing is as we continue to be more separate and as we continue to be more digital and, try to create, like the metaverse and seeing each other in virtual world and all these different things
Hmm.
it will still not be the same because
No.
our biology has not caught up even a fraction of a percent to what has
Hmm.
happened in the last, say, 30 years with technology.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
took us 250,000 years to get there. So
Right.
30 years is nothing compared to what's going to happen. So maybe give us another 250,000 years and having everything paused exactly as it is today, then maybe we'll catch up. But that's not going to happen. It's going to keep marching
Hmm.
forward and we're not going to catch up. And it's going to keep changing the way we interact with each other as human beings profoundly to where the hardest thing that I've noticed, especially, is the level of distrust that we have with just even our neighbors now, or the lack of
Mm.
ability to even know who our neighbors are anymore, is
Right.
because you're so isolated in your own little bubble now. Because you
Hmm.
don't have to go outside of your core friend group whenever you
So,
made it because of the way you can connect with each other
yeah. Kind of going back to something that you had mentioned during COVID, especially,
now. Hmm.
and you're talking about people leaving businesses because they
Yeah,
discovered, well, this really isn't what I'm passionate about. This is not
yeah.
my purpose. And
Hmm.
so they left so many of their businesses. Um, do you feel through people that you've worked with and talked with,
Hmm.
are they rediscovering their passion and purpose? I mean, no pun intended, because that's the name of the show. But is that what you're finding, that they're still looking for that, or did through COVID were they able to rediscover a new passion and purpose?
Some have, but a lot are still struggling with it because they were never really because they weren't in touch with it kind of in the beginning, right? Because if
Mm-hmm.
you think about, of course, the educational system, when was it developed? It was developed at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to
Right.
train people to be used to an 8 to 5 working job.
Right.
And we still kind of look at it that way. We've added some extra stuff, extra flexibility, extra things to try to make it fit with the way the world is today, but it's still not the same as the way things, like I still think, going back to apprenticeships and doing those kind of things, I learned more from doing my practicum, which was in-person hands-on work, than I did in
Mm-hmm.
any of the classroom work that I did. And
Yep.
I think that is one of the things that, as we continue to go through this stuff, figuring out those pieces is going to be very vital as a species to move forward into this next evolution of whatever's going to happen, because we are still kind of balanced on this weird precipice of being stuck in the past, but yet hurtling so fast towards the future that we don't
Right.
know what's coming next. And that's the part that is it's the most amazing thing in the world, but it's also the part that is like, yeah, but you're almost missing out on some of the humanity of it as well. And
Right.
that's dangerous, because if we see everybody as the enemy, then everybody becomes the enemy. And then
Mm-hmm.
we can't have civil conversation anymore. Then the very fabric of this thing called society, this grand experiment that we've been in, begins to fall apart. Because, the fact now, just the thing I'm most amazed about is, because of podcasts like this, mental health awareness has increased exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
From celebrities, from people like you, from people like me, that come on here and talk about all these different things that give people, again, access to this kind of knowledge that before they wouldn't get it unless they came to a therapy session, or they
Because it
wouldn't
was
get it
almost
unless,
taboo.
because it was almost taboo. And now it's like more and more people are saying, no, I am going through stuff. I need to talk to somebody about the stuff I'm going through. I need someone to name what I'm going through, because I know how it feels to me, but I don't know what it is. All I know is I don't like how I feel. I feel disconnected. I feel empty. I feel alone. I feel
Mm-hmm.
without purpose. I feel in these ways, and I don't know what to do about it. And I'm just suffering, and I hate it, and I don't know what to do. And that's the thing that I'm seeing more and more and more is, that's why, when people are talking, when people ask, like, why did you call it Beat Burnout in 15 minutes a day? Why didn't, because when you read the book, one chapter is about burnout.
Mm-hmm.
The rest is about all the other ways that you can do stuff to get back to your life. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, because it is burnout. It's not
Right.
just about, it is burnout. And burnout is not just about work, but because it's been categorized as that, people don't see it for what it is. So I'm trying to basically change the narrative around it so people can recognize, oh, burnout is profound disconnection from yourself, from your people, from your purpose, from your life. That's what
Mm-hmm.
burnout is. And that's why it happens in these little micro bursts, and then it becomes the big stuff. And then finally it gets to this thing where it literally affects your ability to be safe and secure. It
Mm-hmm.
then, because it starts at basically the top of Maslow's hierarchy and breaks it all the way down until it's the base survival stuff finally gets hit. And that's what people don't realize, is that the the base is what we need to be able to get to those other things. So when that starts becoming affected, then you're in real danger, because it's one of the hardest things to pull out of. You're basically in a nosedive, and you're now 500 feet off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of strength to pull out of it. And some people hit, and some
Yeah.
people, if they're lucky, they might bounce enough that they can get out of it. And some people don't. And it's a really scary thing to see.
Well, I think a couple things when you talk about a microburst, a
Mm-hmm.
couple things that come to mind for me is I know that, and I can only speak for Southern California. I can't speak for anywhere else because that's where I spent my teaching career.
Yeah.
But when we have only a couple of counselors at the school, and each
Mm-hmm.
counselor, their load is 500 kids each, and sometimes
Yeah.
more, right there, that is where, in an area right there, that schools are doing, district are doing a disservice to
Mm-hmm.
our kids, because if they get to see their counselor once a semester or
Mm-hmm.
once a school year, just
Mm-hmm.
because, oh, they got to check on, their
Mm-hmm.
calendar, their
Gotta
schedule
check
for
the
the next
box.
year
Yep.
and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I know that my friends that are school counselors, that is the thing that frustrates them the most, because it's more than just getting kids ready and prepped to go on to higher education or
Yeah.
military or whatever it may,
Mm-hmm.
trade school, whatever. It's dealing with the whole person. And I also
Yeah.
feel, going along with that, in an education standpoint, we in California anyways have cut out what they consider to be the fluff, the
Mm-hmm.
elective classes where,
Yep.
music, art, dance,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things.
Yep.
And these are all ways that I know, for me, when I was in school, these were part of my outlet. This was my
Yeah.
creativity, which
Mm-hmm.
helped me mentally and physically and psychologically.
Yeah.
And now we're taking all that out, and we're just putting more and more restrictions and
Mm-hmm.
requirements
Yeah.
on our kids, that we're actually starting them on a burnout journey in elementary school.
Yes. Oh, I 100% agree. And that's one of the things that I'm the father of two boys. My boys are 12 and 14 and a half. So they're at the wonderful peak age of, I don't need to listen to you anymore. And I might listen to you. I'm not quite sure yet. And
Depends on my
so,
mood.
yes, it depends on my mood. And so I've witnessed that with them, where for their mother and I, because she's a therapist as well, we really try to make sure that, well, we know we're going to screw them up. So let's try to screw them up the least amount possible as we can. And so we really work on really emphasizing, we limit their screen time. We make their screen time contingent on things. During the school year, they basically get 2 hours of video game time on Friday, on Saturday, and on Sunday. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the time, no video game time during the course of the week. They have their phones, but all their stuff is fully restricted, where I can see everything that they're doing and I can turn it off. If you sass me, I can just go like that. And they get
Mm-hmm.
mad at me because that's where you always go first, is you're just going to do that. And I'm like, well, you know what? Yeah, because you know why? Right now, you're being extremely disrespectful. So you need to understand what that means. There's consequences to your actions. So
Right.
we're doing these things, but we're also trying to have them go do sports, let them go do art, let them go do all these other extracurricular activities, because being a well-rounded human being is not just being book smart. You have
Right.
to know how to handle people. You have to know how to handle failure. Because one of the things, my wife worked at one of the top intensive outpatient programs in Silicon Valley, and what she noticed was kids that were around 25 to 28 that had their first major failure didn't know how to handle it because they never got taught how to handle failure properly. So
Mm-hmm.
psychologically, it broke them to the point where they became so depressed, they became suicidal, or they literally became psychotic
Yes.
because of it. Where
Yes.
that's the stuff that's so scary, is when you take out the fluff, you're also taking out psychological resilience. You're also
Mm-hmm.
taking out the ability for people to step back and analyze a situation and say, this really isn't the be all end all. This isn't going to ruin my life if this doesn't go my way. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that is really frightening in the world, is that we are tracking everybody towards, be in tech or be on YouTube or be in this specific way, where, okay, well, what happens when we don't have any more plumbers? Well, it's going to be a problem. What happens when we don't have any more electricians? Well, it's going to be a
Exactly.
problem. What happens when everybody is doing stuff that has no real technical value or skill? And
Right.
it's the diversity piece. But because of technology and because of the ability for people to get stuck in these echo chambers, it, even though it's designed to give us more expansive and more ability to connect, it's limiting it. We are, as human beings, are using it the opposite. We're using it to funnel and funnel and funnel and say, okay, this is the other, this is my group of people, because we
Mm-hmm.
can't help it, because that's biological programming. when
Right.
when you were when you literally were raised in groups of 25 to 100 people, that anybody that would come in from the outside was looked at with suspicion because they're unknown. And we
Mm-hmm.
still have that built into us because that lasted for about 186,000 years. And so we've only had literally 30 years of this. So
Mm-hmm.
let's take a step back and go, hey, do we need to make better choices around going outside to play? Everybody,
Right.
I'm talking adults too.
Yeah.
Get out,
Yes.
go
Yes.
outside and play, get back to that childhood thing. Literally throw the ball with your kid, take them actual live mini golfing, go to the park, do these things, be in the world, be present, because that's the stuff that is getting cut out and getting removed. Like the fact that recess now ends at grade 4 makes me sad, because I
Yes.
think there should be recess all the way through college,
Yes.
because you need that. You need
Exactly.
time to play. Because it's
Yes.
when you don't play, that's when you begin to burn out, because that's where the creativity is.
Yeah, no, exactly. So going back to your book, what is an example of something that somebody can do 15 minutes a day to help them prioritize themselves?
Yeah. So one of the things that I did, so when I was at my most profound burned out during my working from home stuff, I went back into meditation and mindfulness, because I learned all about Buddhism and stuff as part of my studies as being a therapist and social worker. And so my thing that I still do to this day is I spend 3 minutes in the morning meditating towards what I want to get out of today. I spend 2 minutes then journaling about it. And then I follow up at lunch for 3 minutes of meditation and then 2 minutes of journaling. And I do that just before bed, just to track my through line throughout the day. Am I following whatever goal, whatever thing bubbled up to the top of the surface at the morning meditation? Because the thing that people get confused about when it comes to meditation is they're thinking, oh, I have to be a Buddhist monk where my mind is completely blank and empty. And no, one of my favorite expressions that one of my Buddhist teachers told me is, telling your brain to be quiet is like asking the wind not to blow.
Exactly.
It's like, you can yell at the wind all you want, stop blowing, and guess what the wind does? It just keeps blowing. That's what it does, and that's what your brain does. So it's not about telling your brain, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. It's listening and seeing what is the most common thing that keeps coming up. What is the thing that keeps bubbling to the surface in that 3 minutes? And then look at that as, how is that going to affect my day? Is it negativity? Is it fear? Is it positivity? What is the thing that keeps bubbling up? Because if you know that, then you can begin to change the way you're using that throughout the course of your day. Because human beings, if you really boil it down, this is a biological computer. And you know what its programming is? Story. And guess who the narrator is of that story?
We are.
And guess how we tend to narrate our story. We're horrible, we're bad, we're going to fail. Everyone's going to look at us and point and laugh, and we're going to be kicked out of the tribe and left to die. Because that is the base of our biological survival, is if I get kicked out of the group, that equals death, because that was the number one punishment for eons, for 200,000, 250,000 plus years. It even still happens today in different parts of the country. That if you get shunned from your group, it literally feels like death is coming for you.
Yes.
And that also explains teenagers.
Yeah, on many levels.
Because teenagers, when you go into high school, all your hormones are now 400% jacked up. And everything becomes this life and death struggle of trying to fit in and trying to become part of a tribe. So you're not in exile, so you don't, quote unquote, die.
Yes.
And that's the thing that we get stuck in. So taking that step back, taking that breath, recognizing the story that we're telling ourselves, writing out the story, then lets us look at it through logic, because emotion lives on the right hemisphere of our brain, and logic lives in the left. But the emotion makes no sense. It always is going to, because emotion starts with fear. And it's the acronym for fear: false evidence appearing real. Then that gives you your main feeling, like let's say anger. And then under anger, there may be disappointment, sadness, and frustration. And that is what it is, because it always comes back to, it's a formula. Your thoughts plus your feelings equals your actions or your reactions. But the problem with a formula is that involves another human being. So that action or reaction attaches to another human being. So now their reaction to your action becomes their thought and their feeling, which then creates the loop you find yourself stuck in. So if you can recognize what you're thinking, and you can recognize what you're feeling, and you can call it out for what it is, which is usually a fear story, it allows you to take that step back and take a breath and go, is this worth my time? Is this worth my energy? And if you do it right, the answer is no. It never is, because our time and energy is the only coin that we really have to spend, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're getting paid for when we go into the working world. Like I
Right.
tell my kids, your only job every day is to wake up, pay attention in school, and live your life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you do. That's what your job is. That's what
Mm-hmm.
everybody's job is.
Right.
And that's part of the process.
Well, something I really appreciate you talking about is that a lot of people think, oh, well, in order for me to do my 15 minutes to keep
Mm-hmm.
myself from of avoiding burnout, I've got to do
Mm-hmm.
it all in one time. And what you
No.
just showed was, it can be broken up throughout the
Mm-hmm.
day.
Yep.
But I know from a personal standpoint, over the last 2 years, I pretty much have designated about the first 15 to 30 minutes where I do my morning devotionals,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a
Mm-hmm.
meditation to set my
Yep.
intention for the day. And what
Yeah.
a difference it has made for me. And
Mm-hmm.
then at the end of the day, over the past year, a friend of mine, at nighttime, we text each other and ask each other,
Mm-hmm.
what was your win for the day?
Yep.
So it's kind of like, even though we might have been beat up a little bit throughout the
Yep.
day on different things, or felt bad about something, we
Mm-hmm.
are reflecting at the end of the day on at least one thing that we could find that was a
Yeah.
win. And what a difference it has made for me when I go to sleep at night to know I did accomplish something.
Exactly. And that's the thing, right? Because we are the one that thing that I often tell most of my life coaching clients and my therapy clients is you have to remember, you always have to remind yourself that the story and the things that you say to yourself, ask yourself the question after you say it to yourself. Would I say this to my best friend? Would I
Mm-hmm.
say this to my kid? Would I even say this to my dog or to my cat? The
Right.
answer is 99, 100% of the time, no, I would
No.
never say that to them. But things we say to ourselves is the most degrading, denigrating, hope crushing, spirit crushing things ever, because somehow we seem to forget that nobody's perfect.
Right.
None of us are. But
Right.
we all strive towards this idea of what we're supposed to do. But the striving is the journey to get there. That's why the way that I teach people about goals is goals are backwards. They teach most people teach people if you figure out what you need to do and then you do the stuff you need to do, that'll let you have the stuff you want and then you'll be the person that you want to be. And it's
Right.
completely wrong. You need
Mm-hmm.
to first figure out who do you want to be. Then you
Right.
need to figure out what you need to do to be that kind of person. And then you go after that to have all the stuff that you want. Because
Mm-hmm.
the thing that I've heard from most people is I did all the stuff. I reached all my goals. I got to the mountaintop. And when I got there, I was like, okay, who am I? Why did I
Right.
do all this? Why did I
Yes.
spend, 80 hours a week achieving this thing only to have everything else around me fall apart? Because
Right.
you aren't looking at who you are in the process. You put
Mm-hmm.
that last instead of first. And that's
Right.
one of the most important things that you can do in your life is you have to learn to put yourself first. And whenever I say it, they're like, oh, well, I don't want to be selfish. And I'm
Right.
like, I'm sorry. How is you taking care of you selfish? Did I tell you to not take care of your family? Did I tell you to not go to work? Did I tell you to not be a good human being? No, I told you need to take care of yourself first, because it always comes back to if you don't take care of you, who will? Nobody.
Exactly. Nobody will. Yes. Put your oxygen mask on first before you put on everybody else's. Same
Yeah, you
thing.
ever wonder why they said that?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, right? Now we'll
Yeah.
listen to that when it's on a plane, but when it comes to everyday life, nope, we don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and talking about us not being perfect,
Yeah.
when I first started delving into the area of meditation,
Hmm.
and I'm not going to say who the famous people were that intrigued
Hmm.
my curiosity about meditation,
Yeah.
but they always presented it that you needed to have that mind of there was nothing else there except the little mantra that you were
Yeah.
doing. And I
Yeah.
will have to say, for years, I felt like I was a meditation failure.
Mm-hmm.
That way, one area that I thought I could be perfect in,
Yeah.
I was failing badly, because as
Yeah.
I'm doing this mantra that I've
Mm-hmm.
created, I'm still thinking about, don't forget to take the bacon out of the
Yeah.
freezer. Don't forget, oh, you got to take care of this. And what about that? And it's
Oh,
just like,
so
oh,
so you were yelling at the wind? Is that what was
I
going
was, I
on?
was. And sadly, it took almost until about a year ago.
Yeah.
I was actually on another person's podcast, and I
Mm-hmm.
happened to mention this thing, and
Yeah.
and she said, Patty, it's okay. And,
Yeah.
and she just twisted everything enough for me to understand that's human nature,
Yeah.
and it's okay. And like you said, go with that, but change the narrative. And
Yeah.
if you have to afterwards write it down, journal it, then you know what's
Yeah.
at the top of your head. And when you're
Mm-hmm.
done, then deal with those things.
And the best part about writing things down is, in order for you to change it, you have to do a physical act to do it, which
Mm,
then makes you really think about it. Because
right.
after you write it out, if you don't like it, there's three things you can do. You can either burn it, you can either erase it, or you can rip it up.
Hmm.
But you get to choose, and you have to do a physical thing to make that thing disappear. And that's the thing that most people, that it's the weird, it's one of those weird things that I always find fascinating, is how superstitious even the most rigidly analytical of us are. For a lot of the people that I work with, when I say, okay, I just want you to spend 5 minutes a day just kind of writing out about what's going on in your head, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. No, I can't do that. Okay, well, why not? Well, because if I write it down, it's true. And I'm like,
Mm,
but you're already doing the actions anyway. So you're telling me if you write it down, it'll make the actions you were going to do more true? Well, no. Then they get all kind of confused. Like, wait a minute, but that I'm like, exactly. That's what I'm trying to get you to see is
right.
just by you writing it out, lets it not be a burden in here anymore. Because then
Hmm.
when you see it and the logic part of your brain sees this thing that you're going to act on, and it's like, are you nuts? Why would we act on that in a million years? It's like
Right.
when you write out, would you say this thing to your best friend? No. Well, then why do you say it to yourself all the time? Well, because I am that way. Oh, you are. Oh, okay. Well, let's talk about that. Why do you
Right.
think that you are that way? Well,
Right.
because this one teacher at this one time in second grade said this offhanded thing to me, and that's what I believe about myself now. Or my dad, this one time, asked me, how are
Hmm.
you going to make a living doing that?
Right.
Or this other time, this other adult in my life said this offhanded thing that they don't even remember saying, completely impacted and changed the trajectory of how you think and feel about whatever you were planning on doing. And
Yeah.
it's amazing how words have that kind of power, that for us, the word we used in that moment was literally just another Tuesday. But for that person, it became this new anchor of this new story that made them a part of who they are. So choose your words carefully.
Yeah, think before you speak. That's what I used to
Yep.
tell my students, and I shared this on another podcast. But one of a couple projects that I used to do with my kids, and I completely forgot about this one till you brought it up about writing it down. Once I started out just once a year doing it, and it turned
Yeah.
out every quarter my kids want to do it. But whatever their greatest worry, concern,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was, I'd have them write it down, and I'd have them slip it into a balloon, and then they'd
Yeah.
go over to the helium tank, and we would all go outside, and I would tell them, when you are ready to let it go, then
Yeah.
let it go and watch the balloon. And this was before the days when we found out that that wasn't
Yeah.
good for
That
electrical
that thing
lines and all that. So I'm just putting this out here
or
right now.
birds or planes or in the environment. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But it was amazing to me how many of those kids took, I mean, because I did a whole talking thing, through this
Yeah.
whole process, but
Yeah.
how serious, and these were high schools, kids,
Yeah.
how serious they took this. And literally, I could see them physically change as they released that balloon and they watched it
Yeah.
go until they could no longer see it. And then
Yeah.
they, and they would watch everybody else's and they would just look around and you could just see like everybody looked lighter and they
Yeah.
were completely different after that particular thing. And then
Yeah.
another thing that I would do is I would give them each a little travel size tube of toothpaste, ask them
Yeah.
to get it all out on the plate,
Yeah.
give them a toothpick and say, now put
Uh-huh.
all that toothpaste back in there. Well,
Yeah.
Miss Toole, I can't get all this back in there. Exactly. The same thing goes for your words.
Yeah.
Once it comes out of your mouth, you can never put all those words or any of those words back
Yeah.
in again.
Anything back. Yeah.
And like you said, there are things that we may have just said flippantly, but to that person you just said it to, 30, 40 years down the road, they're still hurting from those words.
Yeah. And that's one of the things is that, so one of the things that I teach people, this is another thing that I do, you can do in about 5 minutes, is I teach them a very specific process to help process through just like letting the balloon go. And so what I tell people is I basically call this your emotional management plan. I have it in a poster. I'll send it to you. You can put in the links and stuff. And what it is basically the first thing you do is I teach them box breathing. And box breathing is a very specific kind of breathing that calms the parasympathetic nervous system, which is where fear lives. And so what box breathing is you breathe in for 4 seconds and then you hold for 4 seconds and then you breathe empty until you're empty for 4 seconds. Then you hold empty for 4 seconds. And you do that 4 times. So it's 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4.
Oh.
And what it does is it basically is telling your brain there is no physical danger, because the way the human body experiences anxiety, experiences large emotional states, is as fear. And so it triggers the fear response. And human beings have one fear protocol: dump adrenaline, dump cortisol, dump norepinephrine, dump all these things, get ready to fight or run for your life.
Right.
And the problem is, when that's happening to you at a desk, it isn't going where it needs to go. It gets stuck in your stomach, it gets stuck in your heart, in your lungs, and in your brain. And then it just cycles through those things, which is why you have, when you're feeling really anxious, you start to get that kind of that rolling, upset, sick feeling in your stomach and in your guts. Why you feel like you can't catch your breath. Why all of a sudden you feel like maybe I'm having a heart attack because my heart feels like it's cramping for some reason. And that actually is what's happening. The more adrenaline that gets dumped into your body, your heart is beating faster and faster and faster. And then it actually does start to cramp, because what is your heart? It's a muscle.
Right.
So you actually are having those kind of things. But the most insidious place where adrenaline causes problems is the human brain. Because what it does to the brain is it speeds up how fast we think, because it's designed to give us a faster reaction time to duck if a tiger's jumping at us, to do stuff like that.
Right.
And so that 1 second that you're sitting there feeling anxious now feels like 10 seconds. And so you do that for a minute, it now feels like it's been 6 minutes, but it's only been a minute, because your brain literally stretches time because you're anxious. So the box breathing says to your parasympathetic nervous system, there's no danger. Stop. Turn off all the endocrine wonder. Turn it off. Turn off the adrenaline. Turn off the cortisol. Turn all that stuff off. That's the first thing you have to do, because what people don't realize is when they think about, oh, I'm having anxiety, is it starts in the brain. It doesn't. 80% of everything that we experience starts in the body, because that's 80% of us, is everything from the neck down.
Right.
So the body is where it starts. So if you can control your body, then you can control your mind. Because then what your mind does is your body says, hey, there's something dangerous out here that's going to hurt me physically. And your brain's like, well, I don't really see anything physical, but my boss did just send me that email asking me that they want to talk. So yeah, maybe there is something that's going to physically damage us when we talk to our boss. So yeah, maybe we should be anxious right now. And so when that's going on, you do the box breathing, then you do a minute or two of journaling. You get the story out of your brain as honestly as you can, literally verbatim, onto this page. You then go shake it off. You literally go and you shake your body off. You go and do some speed walking. You go and do some push-ups, some sit-ups. You go do something to get the blood moving, to get the adrenaline out of your brain, your heart, your lungs, and your stomach. Get into your arms and legs where it belongs. Then go back and read what you wrote. Because most of the time when you read what you wrote, you're going to be like, wow, that's the thing that I was just going to act on. Really, that makes no sense. Because if I acted on that, then everything I was afraid of would have come true. If I acted on my boss is going to yell at me and fire me, I would have gone in there defensive, hostile, and angry to the point where they might have decided to fire
Done
me.
that. Yeah.
Where it creates the self-fulfilling prophecy because the fear story tells us that we are threatened. And that's why taking that 5-6 minutes to stop and breathe, because doing that 4-4-4 breathing takes about 1 minute and 20 seconds to do.
Will you repeat what that is again one more
Sure.
time?
So the first thing you do is you box breathe. And so you breathe in for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, you then hold empty for 4 seconds, and then you breathe in for 4 seconds. So by doing that, it allows your parasympathetic nervous system to calm down. You then journal what's going on inside of your head. You then go and do a quick bit of exercise. You just literally just shake it off. You just do that stuff because when you do this, when I shake off my body like that, I can't stay mad or anxious because I feel like so foolish. It makes me just kind of want to smile and laugh because I'm doing that to myself.
Right. Right.
Because it's like, or I think of Taylor Swift songs when I do it, because then it makes me laugh even more.
Shake it off.
Yeah,
Shake it
off, right? You do that. And then and then you go back and you read what you wrote, but you rank it on a scale of 1 to 5. If you're anything 3 or above saying, I still think this could happen, do it again. Because that means you haven't cleared the gunk out of your brain yet.
Right.
You need to do it again. And so taking 10 minutes total to really get this out of you will then change the entirety of the next thing that happens. Because if you stay in that anxious state and then you move on to the next thing, now you're more anxious when you talk to the next person. You were anxious when you talk to the next customer. You were anxious when you talk to the next coworker. You were anxious when you talk to your spouse, to your friends, to anything. The anxiety doesn't just disappear on its own because the story is still there saying, but this could happen. What if? Watch out. There's still danger out there. The world is unsafe. That's what our story is for humanity, because for 250,000 years of our history, we were prey up until about the last 500 years. We were prey for everything.
Right.
So that fear story lives in us. And when I tell a lot of other therapists, well, that feelings start with a fear story, they're like, that doesn't make any sense. But when I explain it to them, they're like, oh, wow, that does make sense, because it's not fear, it's survival. But for humanity, fear is survival, because be afraid of what's in the dark, because you don't know what's out there and it can get you. Be afraid of fire because it can burn you. Be afraid of eating that weird looking mushroom because it could kill you. Be afraid of, that porcupine.
Sticking a bobby pin in an electrical socket.
Yes, exactly. But that's the thing, is once we realize that fear story is what starts the feeling, even in happiness. And people are like, that doesn't make any sense. How's there fear in happiness? I'm like, well, have you ever been with someone and been in this moment where it's just so amazing and so joyful and so wonderful, and then the thought comes across your brain, man, am I ever going to feel like this again? What is that? Right. Oh, is there a little bit of fear mixed in there that maybe you'll never be this happy again? And that's the thing, is when we recognize that everything starts as a fear story, the more we can uncover the fear story, the more we can look at it, recognize it for what it is, we can start sticking red flags in it and say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go down to anxiety town anymore. I'm done. I don't want to do these things because I'm tired of smelling Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yes, I'm tired of being the chicken that's frying.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Well, and unfortunately, there are people in my family that's pretty much how they have lived their whole life, is they're always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Well, this good thing happened, and I'll be happy for a few moments here, but that's all I can give it because I've got to wait for the next shoe to drop.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
It is. And the only way through that is you have to be willing to stop and face it. That's what That's what the emotional management plan is. It's stopping and facing the story, facing the fear, and deciding, is this justified? Because what I've found for 99% of my life, 99% of the things that I tell myself are going to, will, might, may happen, that's going to destroy my life, I'm still waiting for it to happen. And I've been through things where things happened that were horrible, but I didn't even see them coming. So if I couldn't see the real bad things that happen, what makes me think I can predict the things that never happen? And that's
Right.
the thing that really mindfulness and these kind of things teach you is now is all we're guaranteed, period.
Yes.
Anybody that tells you any different doesn't know what they're talking about, because you can't fix the past, because the past is over. It's locked in cosmic concrete. Until we invent time travel and completely screw everything up, there's nothing we can do about it. The past is the past. And you can't worry about the future because it doesn't exist. It literally isn't here yet. That's why when you really think about this, the Annie song, tomorrow, tomorrow, you're only a day away. Yeah, it's true. Wait, have you ever gotten to tomorrow? I haven't. It keeps turning into today for some reason.
It
It's
does,
really weird how that works.
Yes.
And that's all you have is today.
Well, and I think when we get into that cycle of worrying about tomorrow, we forget to be present in the moment, and we miss so many things that could bring us joy and happiness because we were so worried about something that hasn't even happened or probably won't even happen. We're missing out on this moment in time.
Or it's something that we accidentally create and make happen because of our negative thinking, which then leads to actions, which then leads to reactions, which then leads to the very thing that we're afraid of. Self-fulfilling prophecy is real because we create it every time when we make choices that lead us there. And then what does our brain do? It says, see, I told you. Well, yeah, but did you look at the last 6 months of stuff that we did that led to this? Oh, well, that don't pay any attention to that. Don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain. No, it's the great and powerful Oz.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Clint, I can tell right now I'm going to have you on again for another episode at another time, because there's so much more I know that we could talk about. But there are some questions that I ask each one of my guests that I'd like to get into before our time is over here. What would you say is the very best piece of advice that anyone has ever given you?
Oh, that is really good. So many pieces of advice. But I would say it's the lightning rod analogy, is be the lightning rod, don't be the one holding on to the lightning rod, because that was the thing I didn't do for the first 3 years as a young therapist and social worker. And man, did I smell like KFC.
And everybody else could probably smell it too,
Yes,
right?
they could.
What would you say that you are passionate about at this point in your life, personally and professionally?
Professionally, it would have to be getting people to realize that it doesn't take monumental things to make change. That literally it takes being mindful and making the right steps in 15 minutes a day, and just changing the story around what burnout actually is. That I would say is professionally. Personally is my kids and my family, is making sure that I can be the most present and engaged father and husband that I can possibly be.
Awesome. What would you say that you're at this point in your life is your purpose professionally and personally?
I try to live my life in a way, and I try to teach people and be in people's lives in a way that is 100% authentic as I can be, because I spent a long time being a people pleaser and a chameleon. So personally and professionally, I really just want to be present. I want to be exactly who I am with everybody that I meet, because I've tried not being me for a long time and it really didn't work out too well. So that's really my biggest thing I've been trying to teach my boys and trying to remind myself every day, and always remind my clients every day, is being yourself is enough. You are enough. That's where I would say that's what I really try to do right now, because we don't hear that enough.
No, we don't. What would you say is your superpower?
I can read people because of the bullying, because of the years of being a people pleaser, because of trying to guess what people need. I can read people's body language. I can read what they need, but I also have the ability to say, just because I can read it doesn't mean I understand it. So I then know to ask the right questions to find out what's actually going on, to see if I'm right. I test my hypothesis instead of just thinking that I know. And that took me 23 years of being a therapist to really realize, yeah, you think you know, but you don't know. That's why my constant question is, did you get that? Do you understand? What do you think about that? Did you explain what I just said in your own words? That's why I love that kind of stuff. I love being a therapist because it's the best job ever, because I get to see light bulb moments every day when people realize I don't have to live like this. I don't have to suffer like this anymore. And
Yeah.
it's taken me a long time to really decide that this is what I was built to do, and it is.
Awesome. How would you say that you're living your best life, or as I like to call it, living your best dash?
I am present. That's it. I am present. When I'm with people, I try to give them 100%. I don't let sometimes I let the wind blow through, but I don't try to grab onto it, because I found that is the thing that when I do that, I get disconnected and I don't connect the way the people that I want to. And then, of course, what do I say to myself? Oh, you know better than that, blah, 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 all the stuff. And it's not worth it to me because I've done that. And it is not who I want to be. I want to be a person that is able to spread hope and joy and change, and that it's okay to not be perfect, and that you are enough as you are. And that's just who I am. That's who I've become over the last, through all the things in my life that have led me to be here now.
Wow, that's powerful. Are there any final thoughts or words of wisdom that you would like to share with our audience?
Man, let's see, do I have more wisdom than you? Let me check here. When you are in that state where you feel like nothing is going right, stop and breathe and ask yourself, what would my dog do in this moment?
Because your dog believes you are perfect.
Exactly. So my dog would probably say, give me a treat and take me for a walk. And I'm like, that makes sense. I probably should go and have a treat and go for a walk.
You're absolutely right. And then you feel better when you came back from taking your dog for the
Exactly.
walk.
100%.
It's a win-win.
That's right.
Oh my gosh, Clint, thank you so much for being my guest today. I mean, this conversation has been so enlightening on so many levels, and it has been a treat to have you here. And I know that it's made such a difference for so many people that are watching and listening out there. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'm very happy to be here.
I know that there's going to be several people that are going to say, I want to connect with this guy. How do I do that? So Clint, please tell them how they can connect with you.
Sure. Well, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Small Changes Big Impact dot the number 4 and the letter U. You also can find me on Amazon, reading with my book, Beat Burnout in 15 Minutes a Day, How to Prioritize Yourself Without Losing What Matters Most. And in my book, there's a QR code if it's in print, or it's a link if it's in Kindle format, where you can actually schedule a 15-minute free phone call with me just to have a chat or to find out more, because I just want everyone to know that it's going to be okay, and you can change in 15 minutes a day if you give yourself the opportunity.
Well, I know that I definitely feel okay now after spending this time with you. I mean, it is, once again, it has been a pleasure, and we'll be looking at after the new year for a second episode to do with you, because I know this is going to make such a difference for so many people. Thank you again for this.
Thank you for having me. I'll make sure to think up all kinds of new stuff.
Excellent. I don't doubt that for 1 second. I know you will definitely do that. And for all of you out there listening, remember, if you want to get in touch with Clint, in the description, whether you're watching it on YouTube or you're on one of the 10 platforms, there we go, for the podcast, go to the description, and those links that Clint just gave you, you're going to be able to touch that link and get direct access to him, and be able to talk with him. And as he just said, he offers a 15-minute minute free call. And I know many of you will want to take advantage of that because he's a very wise man on many levels. So for all of you out there listening, remember to also subscribe and listen to the podcast by following it so you know when all the new episodes are coming out, and share it with your family and friends. I would greatly appreciate that. And don't forget also to check out my website, which is www.pathwayswithpatty.com. You can sign up for a free Zoom chat with me. And if you'd like to be a future guest on my podcast, that's another way that you can contact me. And you can also get my free Pathway to a New Beginning roadmap. So until we meet again, continue to live your best dash and know that life's an adventure, and I want you to enjoy the journey because your life matters. Thank you for joining us today, and may God bless you all.